Well, here we are. Netflix did it, everyone. They took one of the biggest anime series of all time and somehow fucked it harder than this did. I went into this movie already knowing it wouldn't be a faithful adaptation, but I never thought that a director and an entire film crew could miss the point of a show so hard. So let's start where all bad adaptations start. The beginning. Light Turner... Light Turner... Light Turner is your average high school shooter who's misunderstood and too smart for this world. So he does homework for his classmates for money, in contrast to his anime counterpart who is smart but doesn't really give a shit about his classmates because they're all awful. Light wouldn't do their homework because he doesn't really have the time, so I guess this remake just needed a way to prove he was smarter since cram school isn't really a thing in the United States, which just makes the fact that this is set in Seattle all the more worrisome. Light is hanging out watching football practice for some reason. He likes Mia, I guess? Why he's here right now isn't really important, but still distracting. Then the wind picks up and our supernatural part of our thriller falls from the sky right next to Light. Now other people have talked about this, but I feel it's super important to say it again. The Death Note didn't choose Light. Sure, it landed at his school, but it landed in an area where any schmuck could have picked it up. Light just happens to notice it fall from the sky because he wasn't paying attention in class. Then, hours later, walks past where it would have fallen, and doesn't even really take it at first. Ryuk then makes a point of telling Light he isn't special, and anyone could have gotten the note.
I didn't choose you. Don't you see this is all just an accident? You actually thought you were chosen because you're so smart or something?
And while I'm talking about Ryuk, his appearance in this movie is interesting. The first time we see him is when Light is in detention because who gives a fuck, and he opens the Death Note and reads some of the rules. Ryuk then knocks over some marbles, which is framed as something spooky, but it's not, and Light sees this CGI disappointment and falls over dramatically like he did in the anime. Good job! But then we start bumping into problems. Ryuk goats Light into writing a school bully's name down, where the original Light learned about the note by himself and started killing with no prompting. He's a psychopath, and that's important. He's fucked up from episode 1. American Light, on the other hand, needs to be told to write down a specific person and given a pen. Now, I'll give this movie one thing, it does have a few good jokes sprinkled around. Mostly, these come from the way Light reacts to things, so Light kills a bully and we get some gore, and then Light goes home to his dad. Now let's for a second think back to Light's family in the anime. He's got a dad, a little sister, and a mom. His mom and his sister are pretty much disposable, so the movie just kills them off. Yep, Light's mom is dead. She was murdered, and Cop Dad doesn't really seem to want to do anything about it, and his sister just straight up doesn't exist. Killing off a parent seems to be the movie industry's way of making someone sympathetic, but remember when I said Light is a psychopath? Yeah, he's not supposed to be sympathetic. He's not supposed to be a way to insert yourself into the story. He's crazy. He has a massive god complex and is a ridiculous genius. Oh yeah, and he has a magic notebook. So, killing off his mom seems to be a movie trying to make him relatable and give him a reason to be passionate about justice, while Anime Light just wanted to be a lawyer and was insane. So Dead Mom 90s Hair lives in a shitty house by the train tracks. Okay, sure. And has awkward dinners with his cop dad. I'm glad they at least got that right. He and cop dad get into a well-timed argument about Dead Mom, and Light throws a temper tantrum and goes to his room. Because he hates his dad, and he likes Black Veil Brides, and you just don't understand! Ryuk shows up and is like, hey, let's do some killing, and Light sees that the previous owners have written in the Death Note and also have left some warnings. Now this is a very interesting thing to add, and while in the anime Ryuk passively mentions that he's dropped Death Notes before, the one Light has didn't seem to have ever been used. This one, however, was stated to have had other owners, and once the owner dies or gives it up, Ryuk finds it a new one. I will admit, I prefer Ryuk just wanting to fuck with people more than being the keeper of the note, but this motivation isn't necessarily bad in my eyes. Ryuk is probably the closest to accurate in this movie, differing in enough ways to still be irritating, but is still recognizable. Now, this is just my personal preference here, but I don't really like his design. I'm not a fan of how his hair looks more like spikes, and the way they keep him in the shadows the whole movie makes him feel less like a character and more like a prop. In the anime, Ryuk always seems friendly with Light, and in the episode where L puts cameras in the Yagami house, one of the first things Ryuk says is,
How's it going? I don't think anyone else is in the house right now. Do you want to play some video games? Come on, it's been a...
Almost implying that when no one is home, Light and Ryuk play fucking Mario Kart like pals. Ryuk is always present and hanging around, and when he isn't, he's usually laying about somewhere else. Anyway, Light sees a cryptic note about Ryuk not being a good guy. Duh! And then decides to write his mother's murderer in the Death Note. I did mention this earlier, but I want to bring up the use of gore in this movie. I don't know if they wanted to shock us, but it doesn't really work. If anything, I feel annoyed by it. Kira's killings are supposed to be swift, they're heart attacks. It's the Death Note's default kill. But not until a few murders in do we even get a heart attack. The changes to how the Death Note works is the most disappointing thing they could have done, aside from... Okay, well, we'll get to you soon. The Death Note has a shit ton of rules. It's a big part of the show. For Christ's sake, they show 2 rules every episode. And what's one of the most interesting rules? Touch the Death Note, you can see Ryuk. Now, this is such a cool scene in the anime, but it's not in this movie, though. Because now, only the owner can see him. This entire episode teaches us about the Death Note and Light and about L, and so many things happen, and the movie found it unimportant enough to completely change how the Death Note works. So, Light then decides to completely shoot his anime counterpart in the face by completely revealing himself in a public place to a girl he hardly knows, because reasons. Mia is obviously skeptical about this nerd having a magic notebook, but after he proves it, she's ready to bone. Wait, what? That's all it takes for you, murder? And then they fuck on the Death Note. You know, as you do. Which makes me just think about Ryuk standing there being slightly offended that he went through all this effort to give the book to Light for them to just make it sticky. The Misa and Light relationship seems to be the main focus of this movie. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad choice for a direction, but again, like everything in this movie, it wasn't well thought out and could have been done much better in literally any way. Anime Misa is in love with Kira and falls in love with Light after. Mia and early 2000s video game Light have a relationship that seemingly starts from nothing and escalates way too quickly to be taken seriously. It very much feels like Heather's. It even takes place within the same time frame as the 80s movie, beginning at the start of the school year and ending with a homecoming. Nerdy, socially awkward but still attractive character falls for a psychopath, and they kill people. Then one of them dies by the dance, and I half expected them to start singing Our Love Is God at one point. The Death Note soundtrack is very recognizable. The way it's composed is very pleasing and fits the tone of its scenes. This adaptation leans more on an 80s aesthetic to set the tone, and is very much like Heather's in that aspect as well. But there is one track that did something very similar to the original, arguably the most recognizable track in all of Death Note, L's theme song. This theme is played a lot and is an amazing track. It starts with one part moving quickly, and one after another other instruments come in and start building to a bigger and more complex piece, almost as if L's thought process is being personified through the music. And the Netflix movie does the same thing, although they opt for a more synth club kind of beat. It does the same thing, slowly building and adding parts as it goes, and I think it's much better than the other 80s tone they used through the rest of the movie. However, L is downgraded to a child. He has too many temper tantrums for my liking. The anime L is usually calm and always analyzing every situation. There's one moment where he's talking through his computer and eating candy and just decimates the bowl, just really gets in there and throws a ton of candy in his mouth. This L is impulsive and childish, while anime L is a lot more careful with how he eats his sweets because he's careful about everything. Like showing up in public! Until later. Other than that slight mischaracterization, I feel like Keith Stanfield still did a good job, the best he could do with what he was given, and every once in a while he even had a mannerism of someone who watched the live-action movie once. The acting in this movie is overall okay, and everyone at least feels like they're putting in their all for their parts. Nat Wolff's Light is inaccurate and annoying, but still well acted, and stupid hair aside, I did enjoy his performance, until I remembered what I was watching. I feel like this movie's main problem is it gets boring. Unlike the anime, it has lulls where I completely zoned out and thought I was watching literally any young adult novel adaptation, except Warm Bodies. You're a good movie. Fuck, where was I? Oh yeah, Death Note. So L does some shit and Light sucks some more and then Mia kills some people, but we think Ryuk did it. Unless your brain is still on, in which case it's obvious Mia did it. Then Mia's just like, hey, let's kill your dad, and then Light's like, I'm not supposed to do that for a little while longer, you bitch! And Mia, being the better murderer, gets kicked out of Light's house for threatening his cop daddy. Why was Mia so ready to kill Light's dad? I don't really know, she's got some stuff going on. In the anime, Misa's important. She's in love with Light and is Kira for a short amount of time. Light uses her, and their relationship in and of itself is interesting and a really fun part to analyze of the overall narrative. However, if the focus isn't on Elle and Light's struggle against each other, you might run into a lot of the cliches that come with a romance story. Oh look, it's raining. I don't know, the whole thing just feels dirty. Mia also is a confusing character who seems edgy for no reason, but is also a cheerleader, but is also a manic pixie dream girl, but is also better Kira than Walmart hair bleach. She is so far away from Misa Misa in every way except one. She's still stupid. But not a fun or endearing stupid, no. The kind of stupid that gets grating and makes you consider writing your own name in the Death Note. Okay, keep it together, man. Misa ends up being the villain of the film, in a story that doesn't really have a set bad guy in it. While Light is a murderer, he's not the villain, and Elle, if anything, is supposed to be a good guy trying to stop the murders. It's more a clash of ideals, and having a designated bad guy that everyone is supposed to agree is the antagonist feels sort of out of place. They hint at her being fucked up by the fact that she eats while watching a gory movie, I guess. They went out of their way to explain why Light is so ready for death, but Mia doesn't get that. She gets turned on by murder and eats while watching gore, but there isn't a clear reason for her actions. She's just like this, and the movie wants you to forget that you're watching it, so don't question anything. So, skip a bit, and Elle meets Light in a public place to have a talk, and Elle says he knows Light's Kira, and Light's like, yep. And that's when I pause the movie for the 25th time to think about my life choices. So Elle and Light go back and forth, and Light acts like he wants to kind of team up with Elle, so Elle is like, fuck you, I'm the Batman, and Diet Light Cola is like, fuck you. And this is where my anger peaks. The colors. Everyone likes colors. Color is used in a lot of different media to give a shorthand for emotion and such. Death Note is no stranger to this. From the opening theme on, we see Light given the color red. Evil, hate, passion, love, blood. The color red fits Kira's whole deal. And Elle gets blue. Cold, calm, confidence, wisdom. These colors are fitting for the characters and are used often to symbolize a lot of different things. This movie uses those colors. But wrong. Elle tends to get more red and Light seems to get a fuckload of blue. Switching the colors switches the feelings tied to them. When we see Elle always in red light and constantly throwing tantrums and such, it seemed like he's more hate and passion. And he really is. Light for once has a good idea and gets Watari to go find Elle's real name, but relying on an old man to move fast was a bad choice and Watari gets the Matt treatment. Mia reveals her.
Make up your mind, neighbor!
So Light finally does something Kira-ish, and then the worst chase scene in the history of cinema decides it wants to be in this movie. And then, my favorite part of the entire film. Why? Running around would have taken probably the same amount of time. There was another car. What? Is Elle really athletic enough to pull this off? Then Scooby-Doo magic doors bring us to a standoff where Light almost gets fucking shot when Hector comes out and saves the day by whacking Elle over the head with a plank of wood. This is fucking comedy gold, I swear. Then Light makes it to the Ferris wheel from the trailer. Light proves he's got the biggest dick by pointing a gun at this poor minimum wage employee, and then the climax has almost shot itself all over our faces. Light pleads with Mia to choose him over unlimited power, and of course the power of love loses like a bitch. Which then, we learned that Light had written an if-then statement in the Death Note, which just... I don't even know how that would play out in a universe with rules. So Mia chooses the book, and it ultimately consumes her. The epic climactic music they could have used goes on a holiday, and we get more 80s pop, as Light and Mia fall to their deaths. However, everything goes according to Keikaku, and Light makes it out pretty okay considering that fall distance. Light actually had a very anime plan to save himself, and when in the hospital he reveals himself to Cop Dad, while Elle straight up thinks of murdering him. And... it's over. With rumors of a sequel circulating, I can only hope that I die before then. Now, the directing shows competency and a clear understanding of how to make a film, but the writing really shoots this horse in the kneecaps. Did this film have potential? Yes. When it was first announced, I was wary. I knew it didn't need to exist, but I thought, fine, it won't be that bad. But as news started to roll out and more teasers were released, I found myself losing hope. And by the time the movie came out, I was past my limits. Disney Channel's Death Note is still a bad movie. If it wasn't based on anything, it would be another stupid supernatural horror with nothing going on. At the end of the day, the question still stands on if it's worth watching or not, and sadly, I haven't been able to find a clear answer for that. While I personally want this dumpster fire to get rained out, I've been surprised to hear that people who hadn't seen the anime wanted to watch it after seeing this movie because they heard that the show was better, and they liked the story enough to want to see it again. I don't think this should be someone's introduction to Death Note by any means, But if it gets more people into the anime, I can't really be too mad about that. Every Death Note fan knew this would be a disaster, and for anyone who likes the anime, I'd suggest not watching this movie and just rewatching the show. The entire thing is also on Netflix, so just kinda scroll down a bit. There we go. That's better. Trying to see this movie as its own separate thing is impossible. They use the title so it is forever going to be compared, and depending on the person comparing, results may vary. Personally, I think this movie is a 4 out of 10, while the anime is a 9. Thanks for watching, everyone, and if you liked this video, why not hit that like button and let me know? And tell me who you would put in the Death Note down in the comments below. And subscribe for some more amazing anime content.